So here we are. I'm Debra Lynne Katz. I'm here with my co-host Krishanti, and we are so excited because today we are going to be interviewing none other than Dr. William Bengston, otherwise known as Bill. And we are going to ask him all kinds of questions about his incredible research and his healing method, where he actually was able to heal mice who had tumors. And I know that sounds pretty unbelievable, so we have a lot we want to find out about that. And Dr. Bengston has been a professor for over 20 years, and he is the president of the Society for Scientific Exploration. And that's where I first started to hear about his research, and not just from him, but from other scientists who were at the meeting who were stating that they had actually studied and examined his results and all his methods and found them to be sound. So let's get started right away. Dr. Bengston or Bill, can you just start off telling us how you got involved in this fascinating area of research?
Sure. Many years ago, I think about 85 or 90 years ago, I had a chronic bad back and would go around in just constant pain, nothing debilitating like I'm flopping on the floor, but I was never comfortable. And this goes back to my early 20s or so. And so I had been in pain for a number of years. I had to give up a swimming scholarship and a variety of other consequences of being in pain. And I ran into a guy who claimed he was a psychic, and I'm a skeptic. And I spent a little time trying to, for fun, show him that he was wrong about being actually a psychic and designing studies to make his psychic stuff go away. And I failed. I couldn't make it go away. It was really annoying. And then he spontaneously morphed into a healer. Short version is he put his hands on my back. And about 5 minutes later, the pain was gone. And the pain hasn't come back. And again, this is 95 years ago, and it was astonishing to me because again, I don't come to this as a believer, but it did happen. And my choices really were: one, ignore it or pretend it didn't happen, or two, try to figure out what in heaven's name had gone on. And so, for better or for worse, I went down the second path and decided to. Let's see what this is about. What just happened to me, kind of a thing. So I went around grabbing his hands and putting them on people with different conditions, and lo and behold, interesting things started to happen. Among the interesting phenomena were he was very good at malignancies. I mean, very good. He wasn't so good at benign tumors. He was good at some things, not so good at other things. So there was a pattern. It wasn't magic. It wasn't wave your hands and everything goes instantly away. Something was going on there. So I watched and then started to participate with him because I was also interested in, could this be replicated? Is it that he's a freak, or is it that he's doing something that other people could also do? So that became an interesting question. So I joined up with him, and we did a couple hundred people, and same patterns would occur, and it was reasonably interesting, but it wasn't evidentiary to me. I'm kind of a crazy person who knows the difference between anecdote and evidence, and since I don't default to belief, I need to unravel what's going on to find out what the mechanism is underneath. And the reality was this: person would come in, they'd have whatever they had. We'd treat them for however long we'd treat them. And again, it wasn't magic. There'd be a dose response and all that. We'd treat them for however long, and then they would get better unless they didn't. There were some things we didn't affect. An example, a wart. Nobody hanging around with this guy could do a wart. And I'm told anybody can do a wart. You can just go up to it and go, boo, and the wart goes away. You clap your hands and the wart goes away. We couldn't. Now, this is interesting, but we could do malignancies. Now, I can fast forward a little bit and tell you that an interesting phenomenon so far, anybody who's learned the method has lost the ability to do warts. Now that's reasonably
Really?
interesting. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Do you have any thoughts on
I
that?
think
Yeah,
there's
I got
one
a ton.
person who can. I
You
think there
can
was
do it.
one who can.
No, they're lying. They're lying. It can't be. It can't be done. But there are interesting phenomena which occur. So yeah, there was one person who tried to claim my prize, for doing a wart, and it turns out she's an anesthesiologist in Scotland, and she claims, and she had pictures and she had all this kind of stuff. It turns out she cheated. She also used oils.
Oh, whales. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
Fiona probably. Yeah.
yeah. So I had her, I had her medical license taken away. How dare you claim you can do a wart? But in any event, so we watched these patterns, and I did a few hundred people, and they would come in as long as they didn't have a wart, and they would have whatever they had. We would do whatever we do, and then after a reasonable period of time, hopefully they'd be better or gone or cured or whatever it would be. But the problem was when you're dealing with people, and this comes from my limitation, person comes in, they have a tumor, you go hocus pocus, and they leave without a tumor. It's not quite that simple, but they leave without a tumor. Was it me? Was it them? Was it time? Did they change their diet? Did they take an extra vitamin? Did they skip their vitamin? Did they eat a grapefruit? And so I didn't know how to untangle it, and so I became frustrated because the only thing that was happening is people were getting cured. And I don't mean to be facetious, but I wasn't learning anything. You come in, you go whatever, and then they leave cured. So what? I mean, they might have been happy about it, but it didn't do much for me. And so the question was, could we do this under controlled conditions? And so after a few hundred people, I went into the lab and took a simple model of cancerous mice that everybody in lab work knows about. I take very simple things that everybody knows about and I interject healing. And that way I can control the other variables. If I take a person, the person comes in, you go hocus pocus, and they leave, who knows? But I know everything about these mice. I know how long they're going to live. I know everything. We interject something and they get cured.
So basically you were taking an established model and the only thing you were really changing up was the treatment that you applied, which was the healing.
Yep.
And one of the things I remember you talking about was that it wasn't just yourself doing the healing, you had multiple people and some of them were even skeptical students.
Yeah, I've never dealt, and so once we got this cure, and some people, I used to say remission, but it's not remission. They're cured. They're cured for life. It never comes back, and we can even re-inject the mice, and they can't get cancer. So something seriously interesting is going on here. And then you have now, and Debra, I think you're exactly right. You have the clinical cases. They're cute. The experimental cases, they're under controlled condition. And so the experimental stuff mirrored what was happening clinically, not exactly, but it mirrored what was happening. So we have now evidence, and I didn't do, this isn't a one time only. I think I have 18 mice experiments at this point, 4 more in the planning stages in various parts of the world right now. The research goes on. And so the question is then, did we get a freaky result or is this real and could anybody do it? And so I tend to be not so comfortable around believers. Believers, regardless of whatever it is that they believe, have a tendency to reinforce their own beliefs. They believe, and they don't want, nobody wants their beliefs challenged, it's their thing. So I'm better off with people who go, I don't believe you. Not too strongly, because that's a belief too. If you know that everything I'm saying is crap, that's a belief. If you know that everything I say is true, that's a belief. I want somebody in the middle who says, nah, show me what you got.
Yeah, so with the skeptical group, if I remember correctly, they had success as well as the non-scout or the believers. Can you talk about that? Was there any difference?
Well, I've never actually used believers as healers because, again, they scare me. So in my screening process for volunteers, which have included both mice, yeah, have included. I never used a mouse as a healer. This is interesting. A new study was born. I had students, I had faculty members, in order to get in to be part of a subject, you had to not believe this and have no experience. You can't have been able to spell healing. You know, you don't have anything to defend. You're just gonna, most of the people in my studies thought, you know, I'm screwing around with their heads. You know, this is a test of gullibility. You know, how dumb do you think we are? You want me to learn this technique and then put my hands around a cage of mice? You know, really, what do you want? So.
Wow.
Bill, what I thought was so interesting too is when you're talking about how the mice would just come to the hand from which the energy is being generated. They just press their bodies against the cage as if they just sensed it, and then they would just walk away when they were done. But could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, healing, I think, and it's more than I think. I have some reasonably good control data using EEGs and functional MRIs and a variety of other gizmos. I don't think healing has much to do with the healer, interestingly enough. I think that healing is instigated by the healee. And I think that if you have mice, if you have animals have an instinct for seeking help. And they don't get all bent out of shape about, do I believe this? Do I not believe? You know, they don't go nuts. They just, I have a need, let me go get the need. And it turns out in virtually every experiment with mice, we can take the cage of mice, spin it, they don't like that, but when it stops spinning, you put your hands down, and the mice will always move to this part on the left hand. Everybody in my system not only loses the ability to do warts, they also become left-handed, which is reasonably interesting. And so the mice will go to the left hand. If you have cells and the cells have motility, the cells will swim to your left hand.
Wow.
And I'm reasonably confident that's not a suggestion, you know, and little kids will move to your left hand.
My cat does. My cat moves his body to the right spot with my hand there.
And the cat will presumably tell you when the treatment's over.
Yeah, it gets up and walks away.
Like, get away from you. You know, I don't need you anymore. You know, and the mice are the same way. Once they're cured, you put your hands down on the cage and they look at you like, what? You know, get away from me. Keep your hands to yourself. You're a loser. And the same thing would be true with little kids. It's the big kids that you know, flop on the floor and get all crazy in the head.
And so what is it about the left hand then? Oh,
that's past my pay grade. I mean, it really is. I don't know yet. I did a series of functional MRIs trying to find out whether or not this stuff was located someplace in the brain. And when I speak of doing a series, I always have independent labs, multiple locations before I'll say anything. You know, so I'm reasonably conservative about this. So the functional MRI stuff I did at University of Connecticut Medical School and Thomas Jefferson Medical School, and we tried a variety of permutations of things. And I was wondering exactly that. If they're going to the left hand, is this a right hemisphere phenomenon? And so we looked and did this and, you know, a bunch of reasonably elaborate experiments. And it turns out, no. In fact, there's no location in the brain that is associated with healing. It turns on and off. There's an on-off cycle that happens in a functional MRI, but the on-off floats in various parts of the brain. It's pretty interesting. We've done EEG stuff looking for this, that, and the other, and I don't know that it's located any particular place. I think if you measure the heart, you'd see a correlation in the heart. If you measure the head, you see a correlation in the head. If you measure the spleen, you'd probably see a correlation in the spleen. I don't think you can't reduce this stuff to a simple biological mechanism. Something past a biological pay grade is going on here.
And have you noticed in your classes when one student works on someone else, they seem to get healing benefits in themselves? Or have you found that with yourself, that have you noticed a healing effect in the healer getting healed while they're healing someone else?
Yeah, I think along the same line that the healer is not anything particularly of importance, sorry, that you are a conduit for something. And the recipient of the, presumably the intended recipient of the conduit gets a benefit, and I think the conduit, the healer, gets a benefit. If I'm not feeling well, there's nothing that I can think of offhand which would give me more benefit than treating someone else, which is another reason to, at the end of doing a treatment, to thank the person, or Krishanti, in your case, thank your cat.
And one of the things that we're really excited about is the workshop that we're going to be having with you. And Krishanti has already done several with you and has gotten so much out of it, obviously. And one of the questions people have, because these days a lot of people have done training in Reiki or other healing modalities. So are you able to speak to how your method or your approach is similar or different from Reiki?
No, I'm really not. I don't know much about healing. I'm kind of myopic. I'm in my own little world, and I have my own little thing going on here, and it produces reasonably interesting phenomena. There are many people. I mean, Reiki's popular in the sense that you're going to see people who have done Reiki all over the place. So many people who've taken my workshop have also done Reiki. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't be qualified to talk about it. Yeah. I can tell you the effects are different. I think, for example, Reiki people, I know this is going to sound unbelievable, they claim they can do warts. That makes me twitchy because I think warts are impossible. I don't know I don't know I don't know enough about Reiki, but they can do warts. I'm told they had difficulty with malignancies. That would be a difference. And it would be interesting to look at comparative healing techniques. And they probably all have consequences. In other words, if you have a wart, you don't go do this thing that I do because I'm no good at it. If you have a malignancy, we can talk. And so there's a bunch of things that mine works on that others, I'm told, doesn't. And there's a bunch of things that other people work on that mine doesn't. So we got to get out of the idea of healing as, I don't know what you want to call it, special. I don't think it's that special. It's interesting. That it's, spiritual, that it's just healing. If you teach me how to play tennis your way and someone else teaches me another way, I'll probably play tennis differently. There are going to be consequences. I think the same is true about healing. Healing, a good card-carrying skeptic like myself, healing's real. It's not an interesting question anymore. It's an interesting question. What does it work on? It's an interesting question. What's the dose? It's an interesting question. There's hundreds of interesting questions, and I'm researching them some of them right now. But not whether healing happens. But all healing is not healing versus no healing. My method produces different than someone else's method, produces different than another method. If you were a good clinician, and I'm not, I don't even remotely pretend to be a good clinician. If you were a good clinician, you wouldn't use what I do on everything. So client comes to you with a wart. You come to me with a wart, I'm going to start crying and flopping on the floor, because this is like, it's a big W to me. But other stuff that apparently other people have trouble with, I don't.
Well,
and
Bill,
that becomes a field of study.
Bill, can you speak for a minute about what it does heal, like what you've had success with?
Yeah, but only for a minute, because it goes pretty far. So certainly malignancies of any stripe, the more aggressive, the easier they are to fix. Some malignancies are very slow growing and they're hard. It's almost like you're playing a tape backward. So if they come in like a freight train, they leave like a freight train. There's nothing easier to me than an aggressive, out of control cancer.
Okay.
It comes in wild, it leaves wild, and it doesn't take very long. So I've got a boatload of cancer stuff. But if you start to do, I mean, we also have neurological conditions completely fixed. We don't have a single wart. Well, you say wart to me, I begin to cry and flop on the floor. We've done paralyses, we've done people with strokes, we've done people with, name something, I can let you know.
I mean, I know you've talked about Alzheimer's and vision, although that's tricky because it heals it so quickly, it changes the prescription all the time.
Changes the prescription. Alzheimer's it seems to be pretty easy to fix.
Because that's the plaque on the brain that it sort of takes away.
Yeah, it takes the Alzheimer's goes very quickly, and we're better at taking things away than giving things that are missing. So if you're missing something, it seems as a generic rule, it's harder to do than if you have something you want taken away.
So if they're missing a kidney, you're not going to grow one with your method.
We haven't yet. We haven't yet. I mean, because I'm insane, I wouldn't have a problem trying, to see what would happen. But I don't know of any organs that have been regenerated, that are simply not there.
I know. You've said it's good with just. I want to just talk a little bit more about what it's effective at healing. I know you said you've had a lot of success with just depression and emotional.
Yeah, depression's pretty simple to fix. I think bipolar is pretty simple to fix. I mean, just think. I mean, there's hundreds of things, but not a wart. Not a wart.
That's the one thing.
Yeah. So, what we really want to do is get something seriously aggressive. So anything that's slow growing tends to leave slowly. Something that comes in like a freight train leaves like a freight train. I think it's just changing the direction of whatever it is.
So what's really amazing to me here, I mean, so much, but what you are saying this is good for, and how the evidence that you have for that is very different than so many energy healers. They do feel that there's quite a bit that they can do, but a lot of them get very nervous when someone says, I have cancer, can you heal me? That just seems like such a huge responsibility. And of course, we always want to make sure that they're getting every kind of treatment possible. And so how do you deal with that? And I'm sure you have all the time where someone is saying, well, I'm up against, do I want to get chemo or radiation, or should I just go this route? What do you say to people when they ask that?
I'm not going to tell you to take or not take anything. You got to go your own path. I can tell you that any failure we've had with cancer has involved people taking treatments that kill. And healing and killing may not be a great, I'm not trying to be facetious. Healing and killing may not be a great combination. So if you're going to take a tumor and blast it with radiation, you're trying to kill the tumor. We cure the tumor. It gets cured. It goes away, and we document that and all that. And if you're going to try to kill while you're trying to heal, I don't think there's any value added. There was a time way back when where I suggested that you not combine healing and killing, but there's been a number of people that I've taught who just tell me I'm a loser, and they do it anyway. And so I say, how dare you, cure all those people? It's kind of rude. But they have done what any good student would do, which is basically tell me to go stick it. They're going to do it their way, which is beautiful. So I'm the teacher, and I get all intimidated by conventional treatments that otherwise are trying to kill you. And some of my students, a bunch of them actually, are not saying, you're a loser. I can do this. and more power to them. One of the things that I would always recommend is never trust me. Not that I'm dishonest, but never trust what I'm saying is true. I don't know anybody who has truth. So I have experience. Go out and do it for yourself. Make it better. Come back and say, loser, I did this. And I'll go, and some of the people who've come back to give me stories, I simply don't believe them. Because I'm a skeptic, and I go, well, I need to dissect you or bring you in the lab or, something like that, because my students are rocking my world.
And so it is really amazing that here you were a skeptic, and now, and I know at the Society of Scientific Exploration, there's believers and skeptics and the whole range. So have you encountered resistance from other members or other scientists, and how do you handle that?
Oh, resistance is different. It depends whether you mean real resistance or skepticism. Skepticism, I'm much more comfortable with skeptics than anybody else. Because a skeptic, at least in my way of being in the world, a skeptic is someone who doesn't believe the stuff and wants evidence of any type of data claim. A believer believes stuff. So I like skeptics, and I myself am a skeptic. There are people who are mindless believers who believe everything is true, and there are people who are mindless believers who believe everything is false. Both sides are mindless. I prefer someone who wants to dig in and see, let me see if you have evidence, show me what you did. So I'm most comfortable with skeptics because I share a similar way of being in the world. Just because I have at this point, I don't even know, 19 mice experiments, several hundred people cured, certainly hundreds of mice cured, plus, I go on. I'm not a believer. It's real. I don't believe I'm alive. I am alive.
And that's just the numbers you just quoted were just stuff that you have data on. There are countless people that your students have gone on to work with, and this is growing worldwide. Yeah,
and my students, some of them are clearly better than me. That's not false humility. I really don't mean that in any way as false humility. I'm not a healer. I can barely spell healer. I'm a researcher, and I want to dissect the problems. But some of the folks have taken my stuff and taken it past anything I've done. It's a beautiful thing. I had somebody in leave a workshop and go out and then take someone who'd been severely radiated and chemotherapied and, on the end, right next to death in a metastatic cancer throughout the body, fixed them quickly and came back and said, ha, you're a loser. And there's no higher compliment to me than that. Because they told me, I don't believe you. That's a beautiful thing. Because anybody who believes me, you scare me because I don't believe anybody, and don't believe me, go test it out. And my challenge to everybody is, I'm giving you my experience, make it better.
And one thing that was really, sorry, Debra, one thing that really excited me about all of this was your presentation of how we can store the energy and apply it that way too. Can you speak a little bit about charging cotton and water and all?
Yeah, we've done it. We've stored it in materials. I have a whole series of experiments going on now. Krishanti, I don't know how much you know about recent stuff, but I'm actually going to start working in the storage problem in a variety of places at MD Anderson in Texas, and also an animal school in Tokyo. And we've gone pretty far in the last even year of storage of healing, and then being able to reproduce it on a larger scale. And it's becoming pretty interesting. So yeah, I'm trying to turn this into an application that would be widely available and widely usable, testable, and everything else. So we've got tons and tons and tons of data on that at this point. Yeah, we can store it. We can store it in stuff. We can store it in life. We can store it in water. So organic material, inorganic material, we can store it in living things. We can store it on a magnetic reel. We can store it in, I've done some reasonably elaborate stuff inside Faraday cages and this, that, and the other thing. And you know, there's very little question at this point that this thing might be scalable. And one of my goals is to make it a scalable proposition. I think it'd be fun to, for example, get rid of cancer and Alzheimer's.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting problem.
When you say you've stored it in water, you've stored it in cotton. Yeah. What is it? What is it?
I'd give you, Debra, I'd give you a right arm for that, you know, to know the answer to whatever it is. But it is, I'll just call it healing intention, but it's healing intention combined with the techniques, you know, that I've developed. So you learn how to do this thing called cycling, and you learn how to do this and the other and the other. And it turns out that it takes on a real manifestation, if you will, and can be drawn upon like you were storing it in a battery. And so the problem, one of the problems of healing, let's say that let's say X number of people take the workshop and they can all do whatever, and they go out and they go fix a bunch of people. I mean, I'm going to recommend they fix rodents, but you know, they go out and they fix a bunch of people. And then they in turn fix a bunch of people, and they in turn fix a bunch. There's still an inexhaustible supply of people in pain. So how do we make it really scalable? Well, I'm trying to make it downloadable. And the indications early now, I mean, it's a reasonably elaborate presentation, but the early indications are we can in fact store it. And we can call upon it, and it will reproduce the stuff, and then we can make it. I think we have data without question that we could store it in the cloud. Wow. And have it as a downloadable cure. It's too early to say that's for wide dissemination, but we certainly have done it experimentally.
Well, and even beyond what you're doing with your particular method or this energy, this has so many enormous implications for what is possible. Just when I heard about in your study where one of the problems, actually, what we could call it displacement in healing, where you were directing the energy, healing energy at the mice in a room, and the mice that weren't supposed to get it seemed to get it right next to them, but not the mice that were off in another state.
Yeah.
So there's all these implications for even say someone is getting healed and their spouse is sitting next to them. Or maybe now with what you're saying, there doesn't even have to be active healing being sent right at the moment. But like, let's say I received the healing and then went home, maybe just standing next to someone, maybe I'm going to have an effect on them. Yeah. And I don't even have to say anything or do anything.
There is some indications, not in a formal test, but there are suggestions that if you've received a treatment, that you become a conduit for whatever in heaven's name this stuff is, that you in fact could, you know, put your hands on your cat and fix your cat, and that this will last for some finite length of time. But we have many indications to this effect. And yes, in our experiments, there's spillover, and it becomes pretty complicated. So we're hoping these mice live and these mice die, but we're getting spillovers in mice that have 100% death. So it's an interesting experimental problem, but the implications are pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's very exciting for just in regular life, but in a study, it is problematic. Same thing with psychic or remote viewing studies too, where you're starting to perceive everything else around you, and the participants are all excited, like, wow, look, I described all these things, and it's like, yeah, but we just wanted you to describe this picture, not these other pictures next to it.
I wanted you to describe the picture in front of me, not behind me.
Yeah.
Right. Same idea.
Yeah, or what I ate for lunch, or what's on my computer, or what I'm thinking right now.
Focus.
Yeah. Well, this has been so wonderful. Krishanti, do you have anything else you'd like to ask at this time?
Oh no, I think we covered a lot of stuff, a lot of ground. So
Yeah, well, I cannot wait for your upcoming lecture and workshop, and I am just so thrilled that we're going to get to experience it. So thank you for joining us today.
thank
You're
you,
very,
Bill.
very welcome. See ya.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.